The smell of sickness is unmistakable, even when masked by expensive air purifiers and the faint, chemical scent of antiseptic wipes. For Eleanor, lying in the enormous, silent master bedroom of her century-old New England farmhouse, a house that felt suddenly too large for her failing body, that smell had become the backdrop of her life. She was only 68, but a recent, brutal bout of pneumonia followed by persistent cardiac trouble had left her frail, dependent, and confined to her bed through the snowy Christmas season. Her son, Michael, and her daughter-in-law, Clara, had moved in to care for her, a gesture that had initially brought Eleanor immense comfort. Michael, her only child, was a lawyer, a fact that had once been a source of pride, now a source of complicated worry. Clara, his wife, was beautiful, impeccably dressed, and had an unnerving ability to talk at Eleanor rather than to her. The arrangement was simple: they would care for Eleanor until she was back on her feet. In exchange, they lived in the sprawling house rent-free and enjoyed the quiet assurance that, eventually, this place and everything in it would be theirs. Eleanor had made no secret of her estate plan. Michael was her heir. However, the care quickly devolved into a subtle form of house arrest. Days melted into weeks, marked only by the shifting shadows on the ceiling and the increasingly impersonal interactions with Michael and Clara. Clara's primary act of care involved ensuring Eleanor remained still, quiet, and out of the way. She spent her days redecorating the main floor, swapping out Eleanor's cherished antiques for stark, modern pieces she sourced online. "We need to air this place out, Eleanor," Clara had announced one morning, carrying off a cedar chest that had belonged to Eleanor's grandmother. "It smells musty, like old money and regret. We're upgrading to a crisp, modern aesthetic." Michael was more subtle but equally disappointing. He worked remotely from the inherited mahogany desk in his late father's study, his head buried in complex legal briefs. When he came up to check on Eleanor, his visits were hurried, always accompanied by the same vague, soothing pronouncements. "You look great, Mom. Just rest. We've got this handled." He never asked about her pain, her boredom, or her fear. It was 2 weeks before Christmas that Eleanor's suspicion began to crystallize into certainty. She had asked Michael to retrieve a specific, sealed envelope from the safe in the study, a small comfort she wanted to keep close. "Just the original copy of my will, darling. It's labeled original. Can you grab it?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Michael had hesitated. He stood by the doorway, shifting his weight. "The will? Why, Mom? You don't need to worry about that. Everything is in order. We talked about this. You just need to focus on getting better." "I know, dear. But I'm an old-fashioned woman. I just want to look at it. Please." Michael offered a strained smile. "It's Christmas, Mom. Leave the paperwork to me. I'm a lawyer, remember? It's all filed safely." He quickly changed the subject to the snow falling outside, avoiding her eyes completely. His refusal was a seismic shock. Eleanor's will was simple, a legal document he had helped her draft 5 years earlier, leaving everything, the house, the savings, the investments, to him upon her passing. Why would he refuse to bring her the document unless that document was no longer the one she had signed? A few days later, Eleanor saw the definitive proof of their betrayal. Clara brought up a stack of clothes that had just been laundered. When she bent to place them in the armoire, a small, laminated plastic card slipped out of the back pocket of her jeans and clattered onto the hardwood floor. It was Eleanor's official, government-issued health power of attorney card. Eleanor, who had been resting with her eyes closed, opened them just in time to see Clara snatch it up, her face turning bone white. "Clara, what are you doing with that?" Eleanor asked, her voice surprisingly strong despite her weakness. Clara forced a nervous giggle. "Oh, this? The doctor wanted us to carry it, just in case of an emergency, Eleanor. You know, since you're so frail. Just being prepared." Eleanor knew that was a lie. The power of attorney was specifically stored in a fireproof safe deposit box at the bank, alongside the original will. They must have retrieved it, meaning they had access to her most crucial legal documents. Michael and Clara weren't just waiting for the inheritance, they were actively taking control of her life and her finances. That night, Eleanor lay awake, listening to the muffled sounds of Michael and Clara celebrating downstairs, laughter, the clink of wine glasses, the sound of Christmas music. She wasn't angry, she was deeply, profoundly disappointed. Her son, a man of law, was using her illness and trust to secure his inheritance now, cutting her out of her own life. She knew she couldn't physically fight them. But Michael had forgotten one crucial detail about his mother. She hadn't been a successful businesswoman for 40 years by being sentimental about contingency planning. Michael knew about the first will, the simple one that designated him as the sole heir. But he had no idea about the second, sealed document, the one she had drafted after her husband's death, the one locked in a special safe in her attorney's office. This was the codicil, an ironclad legal instrument that Michael had never seen, and it contained a devastating provision designed purely to prevent the very manipulation currently unfolding. The codicil stated clearly, if the primary will is contested, altered, or superseded by any document without the express, physical, and witnessed authorization of Eleanor Vance, the primary will is nullified, and the entire estate is automatically transferred, without recourse, to a secondary beneficiary. And that secondary beneficiary was not Michael, or Clara, or any human being at all. It was the Paws and Whiskers Animal Sanctuary in northern Vermont. Eleanor smiled faintly into the darkness. She was frail, but her mind was sharp. Michael and Clara had just made a catastrophic error, and they were about to spend Christmas getting exactly what they deserved, nothing. They were celebrating their premature victory, unaware that the most consequential piece of paper in the house was not the will Michael had secretly drafted, but the hidden codicil that would ensure its immediate destruction. Her only job now was to survive long enough to expose the deceit. The antique grandfather clock in the downstairs hallway chimed 3 times, a hollow, resonant sound that seemed to mock the stillness of the house. Eleanor had not slept. She lay rigid beneath her heavy duvet, her ears strained, listening for the telltale signs of movement from the floor below. The realization that her son was actively, legally betraying her was a slow-acting poison, chilling her more effectively than the New England winter outside. Her weakness was her biggest obstacle. Her pneumonia had left her lungs compromised, and the simplest movement, sitting up, reaching for a glass of water, left her winded and dizzy. She knew a physical confrontation was impossible. Her weapon had to be precision, timing, and her superior legal knowledge. Around 3:30 a.m., she heard it, the soft, almost imperceptible creak of the floorboards outside Michael's study, followed by the muffled thud of the heavy mahogany door closing. Then, silence. Eleanor knew Michael's routine. He often worked late, but the deliberate stealth suggested this was not about late-night legal briefs. Driven by a surge of adrenaline, Eleanor slowly, painstakingly, slid out of bed. The floor was freezing beneath her feet. She was wearing a thick nightgown and a silk robe, a small comfort against the intense cold of the unheated hallway. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she reminded herself, it is not anger, it is necessity. She crept across the plush carpet, using the hallway walls for support. The study was located on the first floor, necessitating a slow, agonizing descent down the sweeping central staircase. Every step was a risk, every creak of wood under her weight sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. Finally, she reached the landing. She could see a thin, pale sliver of light beneath the study door. Pressing her ear against the cool wood, she heard low, urgent voices, Michael's and Clara's. "Are you sure the witness signatures are plausible?" Clara's voice was tight with nervous energy. Michael replied, his voice a low, dismissive murmur. "They're fine, Clara. They're associates from the firm, they owe me favors. We backdated the notary seal by 4 months, right before Mom got sick. It's perfect. It supersedes her old document. Once we probate it, the house and the accounts are ours." "And the power of attorney?" "That just speeds up the process," Michael chuckled, a sickening, self-satisfied sound. "It gives us control now. By the time Mom is well enough to even try and look at her bank statements, it'll be too late. The new will leaves everything to you, darling." The sole beneficiary. We did it. Eleanor closed her eyes, fighting the urge to retch. The betrayal was complete. Michael hadn't just planned to change the will, he had already executed a sophisticated, fraudulent document designed to seize the estate immediately upon her passing, or even before, using the power of attorney. She pulled out her ancient smartphone, a model Michael and Clara had long ago dismissed as being too basic for modern use, but one she had purposefully kept charged and hidden. It was old enough that they never considered it a threat. She realized she needed physical evidence of the timing. She could hear Michael moving toward the desk. Quickly, she slipped the phone into the thick, carved base of the hallway grandfather clock, angled towards the study door. She pressed the voice recorder and, just for a moment, held the camera ready. The study door suddenly opened a crack. Michael was stepping out to retrieve something from the hallway table. Eleanor flattened herself instantly against the wall, just out of his direct line of sight, shrouded in the deep shadow of the landing banister. Michael was holding a small, silver tray. On it, placed carelessly, was a copy of the new will, the fraudulent one. She could clearly see the section marked testator signature, followed by a clumsy imitation of her own looping script, surrounded by the necessary notary and witness seals. It was a terrible forgery, stiff and unnatural. Michael paused, placing the tray on the hallway table. He needed to get a glass of water from the kitchen. As he disappeared down the dark hallway, Eleanor seized her opportunity. Moving with the speed and silence of a cat, she darted to the table. She didn't touch the document, she couldn't risk leaving a fingerprint. Instead, she angled her phone over the signature block and silently snapped a picture, ensuring the digital timestamp would be captured. She snapped one more, wide-angle shot showing the document lying next to the grandfather clock, the clock whose chiming had just confirmed the time of the fraud. She retreated instantly back to the shadowy banister just as Michael returned, oblivious, and collected his tray. Michael went back into the study, and Eleanor, her body shaking from the exertion and the emotional shock, began her ascent. The photos were safe. They proved two things: first, the new will existed, and second, the signature was a forgery, and it had been handled by Michael and Clara. More importantly, they confirmed the timing of the fraud, which would be crucial for establishing the timeline of the codicil's pre-existence. Back in her room, Eleanor collapsed into bed, breathless. She stared at the ceiling, feeling the cold, hard certainty of her path. Michael had gambled his relationship with his mother for money, trusting in his legal skills to secure the win. But he had forgotten that sometimes, the simple, quiet truth is the most powerful legal counterargument. He thinks he's getting a fortune, Eleanor thought, pressing her hand over her fast-beating heart. He's really inheriting a lifetime of guilt and absolutely nothing else. And all because he was too greedy to simply wait for nature to take its course. Her sole mission now was to survive Christmas Day, keep her health stable, and ensure those photos and the codicil in her lawyer's vault were presented at the exact right moment. The day before Christmas Eve was a blur of manufactured festivity. Clara had enlisted 2 local florists to completely transform the lower level of the house, draping every banister and mantelpiece in fresh garlands. The scent of pine and cinnamon was overwhelming, designed to smother the scent of Eleanor's lingering illness and the stench of their legal deceit. This wasn't holiday preparation, it was setting the stage for their grand unveiling as the rightful heirs. Eleanor watched the transformation from her window, a silent prisoner in her own home. Her heart still ached from Michael's betrayal, but the pain had been replaced by a focused, burning need for justice. The only thing she needed now was communication, a way to reach her trusted estate lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, and transmit the photographic evidence of the forged will. Michael and Clara had systematically isolated her. Her bedside landline had been disconnected, ostensibly because the line was faulty. They kept her ancient cell phone charging downstairs, claiming they needed to manage her few incoming calls, which meant they screened everything. Her only weapon was the phone hidden in the cavity of her old music box, the one she had used to snap the pictures. The moment came mid-morning. Clara, dressed in expensive leisure wear, announced loudly, "I'm running to the market for the last-minute artisanal cheeses. Michael, you watch Eleanor." I should only be 30 minutes. Michael, preoccupied in his study, merely grunted an acknowledgement. Eleanor seized the window of opportunity. She knew Michael would be engrossed in his work. She needed to make the call seem mundane, almost accidental. She crawled out of bed, her limbs protesting, and grabbed the hidden phone. The screen flashed with the time, 10:48 a.m. She quickly dialed Mr. Abernathy's direct line. She prayed he would answer personally, or the entire plot would fail. On the fourth ring, a familiar, measured voice answered. Abernathy Law. George speaking. George, it's Eleanor Vance. Do not sound surprised. I am severely ill, but lucid. My son and daughter-in-law are here. They are recording all incoming calls on the primary line. I am on a burner phone. I need you to listen, and you must follow my instructions precisely. Mr. Abernathy's professional calm did not falter, but his voice dropped immediately. Understood, Eleanor. I am listening intently. In a tight, breathless rush, Eleanor recounted the last 3 weeks, the refusal to show her the old will, the citing of the power of attorney, and, most crucially, the middle-of-the-night raid and the forged document. Michael has fabricated a new will, backdated it, and named Clara as the sole beneficiary, Eleanor whispered, fighting for breath. He believes he has succeeded. I have photographic evidence of the forgery and the time of its execution. Eleanor, that is attempted felony fraud. We need to file an injunction immediately, Abernathy urged. No, George. We don't, Eleanor countered firmly. That's what Michael expects. He expects me to fight him legally. That would tie the estate up for years, and frankly, I don't have the energy for a prolonged legal battle. She took a shaky breath. I need you to deploy the codicil. The one we filed and sealed 5 years ago, after my husband passed. The one stating that if the original 2018 will is altered, contested, or superseded without my express, physical presence, the secondary beneficiary immediately takes precedence. Abernathy paused, a faint, metallic clink of a pen hitting his desk audible over the line. The codicil of contingency, yes. Sealed and recorded. But Eleanor, that document, it's absolute. If we activate it, the entire estate, the house, the stocks, everything, goes to the Paws and Whiskers Animal Sanctuary in Vermont. Exactly, Eleanor confirmed, a ghost of satisfaction in her voice. Michael and Clara are being punished for their greed, not my lack of generosity. They will receive nothing. My desire to pass the estate to Michael was contingent upon his respect and integrity. Both are gone. They have chosen to steal, and now they will inherit the consequence of theft. She then instructed him on how to retrieve the photos from a cloud service she had access to and dictated the exact time and context for presenting the codicil. On Christmas Day, after I am gone, they will present the forged will. Wait until they are celebrating, George. Wait until they are certain of their victory. Then, present the codicil and the evidence. Do not contact me again unless it's an absolute emergency. Understood, Eleanor. I will execute your instructions precisely. May God be with you. She hung up, her body slick with cold sweat. She managed to crawl back into bed just as Michael opened the door, a forced smile on his face. Mom, the caterer needs to know if the ice sculptures should go near the wine bar, he said, his voice flat. They'll be here soon. Just rest. Eleanor nodded weakly. The ice, yes. Whatever Clara thinks is best, dear. I trust your judgment. The word trust felt like a lie on her tongue, but she knew it was the perfect camouflage. Downstairs, the first waves of family members and Michael's close associates began to arrive for the pre-Christmas gathering. Eleanor could hear Clara's smooth, practiced voice managing the narrative. Yes, it's been dreadful, hasn't it? Eleanor is so frail. Honestly, Michael has had to step in and take legal control of everything. Just for her own protection, you know? She's a bit confused lately. Thank God Michael is a lawyer, he's had to file so much new paperwork to ensure things are managed correctly. But we're getting there. Eleanor listened, a faint, cold smile playing on her lips. They were weaving the illusion of her mental fragility and Michael's legal necessity. They were setting the public precedent for the forged will. She let them talk. She let them lie. Every word Clara spoke, every nod of sympathy from an ignorant relative, was another layer of concrete being poured over the trap. They were building their gilded cage, unaware that the floor was lined with dynamite, and she, the frail woman in the bed, held the detonator. The next 24 hours were the most difficult Eleanor had ever endured in her own home. Michael and Clara, emboldened by the execution of the forged will and convinced of their imminent victory, dropped their veneer of dutiful concern. The Christmas performance began in earnest, but it was a celebration only for them. Clara, now operating with the full authority of the fake power of attorney, started making executive decisions about Eleanor's personal possessions. She marched into the master suite, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood, and began systematically inventorying and tagging items. "These old family portraits are simply too morbid for the current aesthetic, Eleanor," Clara announced, holding up a framed photo of Eleanor and her late husband, Thomas, taken on their honeymoon. "They're going into storage. Michael will have a contractor build a proper climate-controlled unit in the basement after the new year. We need to clear this room out for the new owners, which will be us, of course." "Those portraits stay where they are, Clara," Eleanor managed to state, her voice weak but firm. Clara simply smiled, a thin, patronizing expression. "Sweetheart, you really aren't in a position to give directives right now. The power of attorney, remember? Michael signed everything. We're simply managing the transition responsibly. It's for your best interests, truly." She motioned to a hired assistant, who gently but impersonally took the frames off the wall, leaving pale, rectangular outlines against the faded wallpaper. The cruelty was deliberate, calculated to erase Eleanor's presence from her own sanctuary before she was even gone. It wasn't just about the furniture, it was about stripping her of her history and her dignity. Michael's act of betrayal was more invasive. He appeared at her bedside holding a tablet. "Mom, I've just updated your emergency contacts and medical preferences under the power of attorney," he stated, his tone overly professional. "I've changed your attending physician to Dr. Hayes, he's a colleague's father, highly discreet, perfect for managing your decline. And I've switched your financial statements to digital only, accessible only through the joint trust account I established. Just streamlining the administration." Eleanor knew exactly what this meant. Dr. Hayes was likely someone Michael could easily influence into signing off on whatever paperwork he required, and by switching her financial access, she was now completely locked out of her own bank accounts and investments. They had seized not just the future estate, but her present fiscal autonomy. "That seems rather drastic, Michael," Eleanor said, closing her eyes as if fatigued. "You know I prefer paper statements." "Nonsense, Mom. It's 2024. Paper is clutter. I'm protecting your assets from yourself." He patted her hand, a perfunctory gesture devoid of warmth. "Rest up. Family is arriving tomorrow for the big Christmas luncheon. We want you to look your best for them." The Christmas Eve luncheon felt like a dress rehearsal for a funeral. All the extended family, cousins, aunts, and family friends, arrived, filling the house with genuine, if nervous, goodwill. Michael and Clara played the roles of the devoted, exhausted caretakers to perfection. Clara, in particular, was magnificent in her deception. To every concerned relative who asked about Eleanor, she would offer the same scripted sorrow, "Oh, she's so frail, bless her heart. She's resting upstairs. We had to move the party downstairs so she wouldn't be disturbed. Michael has been a saint, managing her legal affairs and her health care. It's been so much pressure, but we're doing it for Eleanor." This constant performance cemented the narrative. Eleanor was weak and mentally compromised, and Michael and Clara were selflessly taking over her affairs. This validated the fraudulent will in the eyes of the family even before they knew it existed. Eleanor, listening through the slightly ajar bedroom door to the waves of sympathetic murmurs, felt a renewed surge of cold determination. "They are isolating me to seize my property. They are using my kindness as a weapon. They are treating me as if I am already dead. That evening, Eleanor allowed herself a few moments of private sorrow. She looked at the empty spaces on the wall where her husband's portrait had hung. She missed his easy laughter and his staunch moral compass. It was Thomas, her late husband, who had insisted on the codicil of contingency years ago. "We may trust Michael now, Eleanor," Thomas had advised, his hand resting on the small, sealed envelope. "But money changes people. If he ever tries to take advantage of you, I want him to know that betrayal has a price. And that price is having everything go to the most unlikely, non-human beneficiary we can think of. It will be the ultimate, elegant protest." Eleanor had laughed then, thinking it was a dramatic, unnecessary precaution. Now, it was her lifeline. She pulled out her hidden phone and checked the status of the photo transfer. Abernathy had confirmed receipt, evidence received. File confirmed. Your instructions will be followed, Eleanor. Do not worry. Have faith in the law, and in Thomas's foresight. Knowing that the evidence was safe and the codicil was armed gave Eleanor the strength she needed. She was no longer powerless. She was the calm center of a legal hurricane, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash the storm. Christmas morning would bring the final confrontation, and she needed every last ounce of her strength to be present for the moment of total, delicious reckoning. The takers thought they had everything. They had forgotten that the power to give is also the power to permanently deny. Christmas morning dawned bright and bitterly cold. Eleanor woke feeling oddly energized, fueled by the adrenaline of the impending confrontation. She knew she had to execute her plan with absolute precision. She was not just waiting for the truth to be revealed, she was orchestrating her own temporary, strategic demise. Downstairs, the house was alive with the sound of family, genuine laughter from Lily and distant relatives, mixed with the loud, strained confidence of Michael and Clara, who were already holding court in the newly stripped living room. Around 10 a.m., Eleanor heard a soft knock. Clara entered, carrying a weak cup of herbal tea and a pill dispenser. "Merry Christmas, Eleanor," Clara chirped, a false warmth dripping from her voice. She placed the cup on the nightstand. "I'm afraid we need you to sign one final piece of documentation. Just a simple notarized release for the insurance company, a minor formality related to the power of attorney. Michael said it had to be done before the probate begins. It just confirms your sound mind at the time of the POA filing." Eleanor knew this was a final, desperate attempt to legitimize their earlier fraudulent actions. They were trying to manufacture fresh, physical proof of her lucidity before she became truly incapacitated. "Of course, dear," Eleanor said weakly, taking the pen Clara offered. She signed the document with a shaky, almost illegible hand, ensuring her signature was completely inconsistent with the clean forgery Michael had used on the will. This fresh, clumsy signature would be crucial evidence of her current fragility, proving that the cleaner signature on the will was impossible. As she signed, she reached out and feigned a sudden, dizzy spell, her head dropping back dramatically against the pillows. "Oh, Clara," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper, clutching her chest. I don't feel well. I feel faint. Very, very faint." Clara, momentarily startled, quickly dismissed the theatrics. "Nonsense, Eleanor. You just need a strong cup of coffee. I need to get back downstairs, the lawyer is due any minute to finalize the last bits of paperwork." She grabbed the signed document and swiftly left the room, clearly unconcerned about Eleanor's distress, a testament to her callous focus on the assets. Eleanor waited 5 minutes. Then, using every ounce of strength she possessed, she activated her next move. She placed 2 prearranged emergency calls, one to a close, trustworthy neighbor, a nurse, and one to her close cousin, whispering only the words, "chest pain. Cannot breathe. Tell Michael immediately." She then settled back, carefully rearranging her body to look frail, still, and alarmingly pale. She closed her eyes and focused on slowing her breathing, making her pulse appear shallow and thready. She was playing the role of a woman whose heart had finally succumbed to the stress of the morning. Within minutes, chaos erupted downstairs. She heard her cousin's frantic, shouted voice, then Michael's horrified bellow, "What? The heart? No, no, no." Michael and Clara burst into the room, their faces etched with a ghastly blend of shock and an almost perceptible layer of financial relief. They did not call for paramedics, they did not attempt CPR. They checked her pulse quickly, inefficiently, and then looked at each other. "She's gone," Michael whispered, his voice trembling, not from grief, but from the sudden, terrifying reality that his illegal clock had started ticking. The stress, it was too much. Clara, ever the pragmatist, immediately took control. "Michael, stop panicking. We have the power of attorney, we have the will, and we have the signed release. Get the family together immediately. We must control the narrative. We need to present the will now before anyone starts questioning the timing or calls the police. We need to be probate ready." Michael, galvanized by the thought of his inheritance, rushed downstairs, his voice echoing with forced, tearful solemnity. "Family! Everyone! I have terrible news. My mother, Eleanor, passed away moments ago, peacefully, in her sleep." He made the announcement sound like a pious relief rather than a tragedy. The living room fell silent. Amid the tears and shock, Michael quickly ushered everyone toward the great fireplace. "Before we make any arrangements, my mother had specific instructions. Because she was so frail and wanted to ensure all her affairs were handled without conflict, she insisted that her last will and testament be read today, Christmas Day, among those she loved." He then pulled out the forged document, the clean, perfect copy they had prepared weeks ago. Clara stood beside him, her face a mask of sorrowful, yet triumphant, control. Michael cleared his throat, reading from the document with dramatic, false emotion. "The key clause, I hereby leave the entirety of my estate, including all real property, liquid assets, and investments, to my daughter-in-law, Clara and Vance, in recognition of her tireless, selfless care and devotion during my time of need." The room buzzed with muted shock and quiet confusion. The will was generous, but leaving everything solely to the daughter-in-law felt odd. However, the family was too shocked by Eleanor's death and too cowed by Michael's lawyerly authority to question it. Clara leaned into Michael, whispering fiercely, "We did it, Michael. It's ours." Michael smiled, a dark, triumphant expression. He raised his hands to silence the room, ready to deliver his final, sweeping statement of ownership. It was in that precise, celebratory moment, the moment of their absolute, fraudulent victory, that the heavy mahogany front door swung open. A tall, austere man in a perfectly tailored dark suit stood in the doorway, brushing snow from his overcoat. He carried a leather briefcase and his expression was grim. It was Mr. Abernathy, Eleanor's long-trusted lawyer. "Good afternoon, everyone," Mr. Abernathy stated, his voice cutting through the solemn silence with the sharp authority of a legal summons. "I apologize for my intrusion on this grievous occasion. I am here representing the deceased, Ms. Eleanor Vance. I have just received urgent instructions that supersede any previous arrangements." He looked directly at Michael and Clara, who instantly paled, their faces draining of all color as they realized their calculated timing had been utterly and catastrophically neutralized. Abernathy was holding the second, smaller, sealed envelope, the envelope containing the codicil of contingency. The game had just ended. The festive atmosphere in the living room dissolved instantly into cold, stunned silence. Michael and Clara stood paralyzed near the fireplace, their carefully constructed triumph crumbling into dust the moment Mr. Abernathy's ominous figure appeared. The entire family, still reeling from the news of Eleanor's passing, now stared, confused and fearful, at the grim-faced lawyer holding the sealed envelope. "Mr. Abernathy," Michael stammered, his lawyerly composure finally breaking. "What on earth are you doing? My mother just passed. We were following her last wishes. I just read the will, leaving everything to Clara for her care." "I am aware of the document you just read, Michael," Abernathy stated, his tone flat and professional, radiating contempt. He stepped fully into the room, his eyes scanning the crowd before fixing once again on the disgraced son and daughter-in-law. And I am here because Ms. Vance instructed me to execute a codicil of contingency under very specific circumstances. Clara, always the faster one to grasp legal peril, lunged forward. That's impossible. Eleanor was frail. She was confused. That document is invalid. We have the power of attorney and a properly witnessed will right here. She slapped the forged document, still warm from Michael's hands, onto the marble mantelpiece. Indeed, you have a document, Abernathy countered smoothly, pulling a sleek, unsealed folder from his briefcase. But let us review the legality of your arrangement. You claim Ms. Vance died peacefully, and yet, I have received 2 frantic, contemporaneous emergency calls reporting severe chest pain and medical distress, leading to an immediate call to 911 which, incidentally, no one here seems to have placed. The family gasped. Michael's face turned gray. He realized his first catastrophic error. They hadn't called for help because they feared discovery, and now that lack of action, combined with Eleanor's prearranged emergency calls, looked suspiciously like neglect, or worse. Abernathy then addressed the room. Furthermore, Ms. Vance entrusted me with evidence proving that the document Michael just read is a forgery. The execution date, notarized 4 months ago, is inconsistent with Ms. Vance's current, severe physical condition, a condition that resulted in an almost illegible signature this very morning on a simple insurance release, as witnessed by Ms. Clara Vance herself. He looked directly at Michael. You see, Michael, your mother was aware of your fraudulent intentions. She provided me with time-stamped photographic evidence confirming your possession and handling of the forged will at 3:45 a.m., 2 nights ago. You used your legal access to fabricate a new will, hoping to preempt the original one and steal the estate. Michael stumbled back, knocking a delicate Christmas ornament off a table. This is slander. I'm a lawyer. I will have your license. You will be lucky not to have a disbarment hearing, Michael, Abernathy returned icily. But let us move past your petty greed and move to the consequences. Your mother anticipated exactly this level of betrayal. She foresaw that you might try to illegally contest, supersede, or alter her wishes. Abernathy then pulled out the small, sealed envelope. The silence in the room was so thick it felt physical. 5 years ago, after the passing of Mr. Thomas Vance, Eleanor and I drafted a second, ironclad legal document, the Codicil of Contingency. This document does not name the beneficiary of her estate, but rather names the conditions under which her primary will is nullified. He cracked the seal with a sharp, sickening sound and began to read the operative clause, his voice slow and deliberate, ensuring every word landed with the force of a legal hammer. Should the primary will of Eleanor Vance, dated October 2018, be contested, superseded, altered, or replaced by any subsequent document, including, but not limited to, fraudulent documents, without the physical presence and witnessed, healthy consent of the testator, then the primary will shall be deemed null and void. In the event of this nullification, and as a measure to prevent the misappropriation of my estate by those who have failed to respect my final wishes and my person, I hereby declare that the entirety of my real and personal property, including all financial assets, investments, and this house, shall be immediately and irrevocably transferred to the secondary beneficiary. Michael and Clara waited, their eyes wide with fading hope, expecting the name of some distant cousin or rival charity. Abernathy paused for a dramatic beat, then delivered the crushing, final sentence. The secondary beneficiary is hereby named as the Paws and Whiskers Animal Sanctuary of Northern Vermont. The room exploded. Aunts screamed, cousins whispered furiously, and Michael let out a strangled cry of pure, agonizing loss. Clara collapsed onto a nearby velvet couch, burying her face in her hands, her dreams of inheriting a multi-million-dollar estate dissolving into the reality of Vermont rescue dogs. The dogs? The dogs get it all? She gave it to the dogs, she wailed, the sheer absurdity of the revenge hitting her like a physical blow. Michael stumbled forward, reaching for the codicil. This is a joke. A punitive clause. It's invalid. We'll fight this. I'm a lawyer. Abernathy calmly placed his hand over the document. The codicil is notarized, sealed, and executed with the highest legal rigor, Michael. It is not punitive, it is a legally binding contingency plan. You chose to void your inheritance through your own greed and fraud. You contested the will by creating a false one. You activated the clause. As of this moment, every piece of property, every stock, and every dollar belongs to the animals. You have inherited absolutely nothing but the legal liability for attempted fraud. The absolute, devastating silence that followed was broken by a new, unexpected sound, a faint, low cough from the top of the stairs. The faint, low cough from the staircase was a sound that should have been impossible. Every eye in the living room snapped upward, tearing away from the devastation delivered by Mr. Abernathy. Michael and Clara, still reeling from the announcement that their inheritance was going to the dogs of northern Vermont, looked like they were staring at a ghost. And there she was, Eleanor Vance, wrapped in her thick silk robe, descending the grand staircase slowly but steadily. She did not look frail or faint. She looked powerful, her expression a perfect blend of righteous disappointment and quiet, absolute control. Michael, believing he was witnessing a supernatural phenomenon, shrieked, "Mom! You were dead. We checked your pulse." Eleanor stopped halfway down the stairs, allowing her voice to carry clearly across the silent room. "You checked my pulse, Michael?" "No, you didn't. You briefly touched my wrist while you were plotting how quickly you could probate your fraudulent paperwork. I merely executed a strategic withdrawal. I could not, in good conscience, pass away until your deceit had been fully exposed and accounted for." The air rushed out of Michael and Clara. They realized that not only had they lost everything, but they had also publicly declared their mother dead and presented a forged will while she was listening, lucid, a few feet away. Mr. Abernathy, who had been informed of Eleanor's plan just hours before, offered a slight, knowing nod to his client. He then addressed the utterly disgraced couple. "Miss Vance is very much alive, and she is now a witness to your felony attempt at fraud. Your power of attorney is immediately revoked, and your access to her accounts is permanently severed." Clara, hysterical, lunged toward Eleanor. "You manipulative old woman! You planned this. You lied." Eleanor simply held up a hand. "I taught my son one lesson above all others, Clara: the law is meant to protect the honest. When you use the law to commit theft and betray trust, the law will punish you. You did not inherit the house, Michael, because you chose not to wait. You stole from me while I was weak, and in return, I have ensured you will never benefit from that theft." The family members, many of whom were now horrified by Michael's actions, began to murmur furiously. The humiliation was total. Michael and Clara did not inherit Eleanor's wealth, they inherited the shame of their public, greedy exposure. The immediate aftermath and the final piece. Within the hour, Michael and Clara were escorted out of the house by a security detail Abernathy had wisely brought with him. Michael's career was instantly ruined. His attempt at estate fraud was quickly circulated through his firm, leading to his license being suspended pending a full investigation. Clara's social standing dissolved, she was revealed not as a devoted wife, but as a calculated criminal. They lost everything they had sought to gain, inheriting only debt and professional ruin. Eleanor, exhausted but profoundly peaceful, spent the remainder of Christmas Day quietly with her few loyal family members and Mr. Abernathy, who brought her a genuine cup of strong, hot coffee. The true winner, however, was the Paws and Whiskers Animal Sanctuary. Eleanor's estate, now worth over $12 million, was legally and irrevocably transferred to them. The sanctuary, which had been struggling to keep its doors open, suddenly had a massive endowment. They used the funds to build new wings, staff a full-time veterinary clinic, and establish a permanent rescue service, all dedicated to the memory of Eleanor's late husband, Thomas. Eleanor, now recovered and vibrant, moved into a beautiful, sun-drenched condo closer to the city. She remained involved with the sanctuary, visiting frequently. She took pride in knowing that her wealth, which Michael had tried to selfishly seize, was now providing shelter, kindness, and security to thousands of innocent creatures. The quiet triumph was hers. She had used her intellect and legal foresight not out of malice, but to hold the line on morality. She taught Michael a painful, unforgettable lesson: trust is the only true currency, and when you destroy it, the cost is infinite. Her estate was now dedicated to unconditional love, the very thing Michael and Clara lacked. A message from Eleanor. Thank you, dear ones, for staying with me through this 7-chapter saga of betrayal and ultimate justice. This story proves that you must always have a contingency plan, especially when dealing with high stakes and deep trust. My moral for this story is simple: a life built on integrity, even if it seems simple, will always outweigh a fortune built on deception. When betrayal is the cost of the prize is never worth it. If this epic tale of financial payback and the power of a woman's plan resonated with you, please give this video a like and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more true stories of triumph. And now, tell me, where in the world are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay honest, and always trust your instincts.